Today we're going to continue our 2019 NHL GM Report Card Series, and we're going to take a look at the work of General Manager Jim Rutherford of the Pittsburgh Penguins. We'll grade his work coming up next. Welcome back here to Top Shelf Hockey. Welcome back to our GM Report Card Series. Now, if you're new to this series and you haven't caught the other videos already published on this series, we're still pretty early in this series though, so stay tuned for plenty more to come in this series. Now, of course, how this is going to work is we're going to take a look at the last season and current offseason for Jim Rutherford. We're going to look at his trading history, the signings he's made, as well as how he made out the 2019 NHL Draft. And then at the end, we're going to grade his overall work and look at the direction of this team and see how things are going here. Now let's kick things off and take a look at the trades he's made during that time frame. Of course, last season got off to not a fantastic start for the Penguins, and they were looking to start wheeling and dealing early on. As early as November 14th, he made his first trade of the year, traded struggling forward Carl Hagelin to the Los Angeles Kings in exchange for another struggling forward, Tanner Pearson. Now, of course, they retained a little bit of salary on Hagelin's part to even things out so that they had an even salary cap hit. Of course, both wingers were struggling, needed a fresh start. Both players ended up kind of rejuvenating themselves, but not with the teams they were originally traded to. Both guys would end up being traded one more time before the season was out, but overall, you could probably call that deal fairly even overall. Not long after, on December the 3rd, Rutherford kept dealing, trading forward Daniel Sprong, who was a promising prospect with the Penguins for a few years, had a terrific junior career, but had a hard time getting himself established and becoming a regular in the Penguins lineup. He was then traded to the Anaheim Ducks in exchange for a fairly young prospect defenseman Marcus Pettersson, who didn't have a lot of time in the NHL, but did have one solid year with Anaheim and has now become a pretty decent member of that blue line for the Penguins. So overall, as much as I was a little concerned over that trade in the beginning because of the potential of Sprong, so far that deal has worked out and Pettersson's been a good fit there, but I guess we'll see longer term if Daniel Sprong becomes the winger that a lot of people thought he would become. That still might not turn out to be a great trade, but as of right now, I think we can give him a decent grade as it's working out thus far. Now, of course, later on into January, after the new year, he continued making a few more minor trades, sending Derek Grant back to the Anaheim Ducks in exchange for forward Joseph Blandisi. Of course, Grant had previously played with the Ducks and then, of course, signed with the Penguins. Was brought in as a fourth-line center, but they were looking to shake up that bottom six. So, of course, he was shipped out for Blandisi, who was someone who can go between the NHL and the American Hockey League as well. On January the 28th, they traded Jimmy Alexiak back to the Dallas Stars in exchange for a 2019 fourth-round selection. So Alexiak goes back to where he began for a fourth-round pick. And then in February, that's when things really started to get more interesting. February the 1st, he made a pretty significant trade with the Florida Panthers, sending forwards Derek Brassard and Riley Sheahan, along with a 2019 second-round pick, a 2019 fourth-round pick, and another 2019 fourth-round pick that they acquired from Minnesota in exchange for Nick Bjugstad as well as Jared McCann. Now, of course, this was pretty much a salary cap dump for the Panthers. They did not have any intent of keeping Brassard and or Sheahan. Essentially, the Panthers were getting ahead of their offseason plans and trying to free up salary cap space to make some offseason moves, which they certainly did by signing Sergei Bobrovsky. Of course, at that point, though, there was heavily rumored they were looking to land Artemi Panarin as well. But obviously, a cap dump for the Panthers. Pretty decent acquisition for the Penguins. They didn't really give up a whole lot to land these two guys. So far, they're still both with the team. McCann seemed to be a pretty decent fit. I do have some question marks, long-term at least, over how Nick Bjugstad fits in. But overall, a decent trade. I certainly think the Penguins come out ahead. But I guess longer term, we'll see if those were the right guys that the Penguins needed to acquire. That takes us up to February the 25th, where he then traded Tanner Pearson. So Pearson's second trade of the year to the Vancouver Canucks in exchange for defenseman Erik Gudbranson. Now, Tanner Pearson, I think it's fair to say, Pearson did better in Pittsburgh than he did in LA, but still wasn't the best fit there. So the fact that they turned him into Gudbranson after originally trading Carl Hagelin, I guess, isn't too bad. But, you know, obviously, you can ask Canuck fans how they felt about Gudbranson. I think they were pretty happy about that overall. Many felt he was overrated and overpaid, but we'll see how he fits in there. I mean, he does have pretty good size, can play a physical style. Once he was acquired, obviously he was kind of replacing the same type of game that I guess Jimmy Alexiak brought, but overall not a significant deal. Now, of course, this offseason, Rutherford's continued wheeling and dealing and certainly made a few more significant trades. He traded defenseman Olli Mata to the Chicago Blackhawks in exchange for a young promising forward Dominic Cahoon. I personally like this trade for the Penguins. I mean, not that Matt is a bad defenseman, but really he's gone through a lot in the last couple of years with injuries. I'm not sure that he's really as effective as he used to be. Really, and Cahoon is a young forward with a lot of upside. So I did suspect that there would be moves on that blue line for the Penguins. I didn't think it would be Matt out of the go. I thought it would be somebody else, maybe like Jack Johnson, obviously, who wasn't the greatest last year after signing a new contract, but obviously Matt had a little bit more appeal, was easier to move, but I do like the acquisition of Dominic Cahoon for sure. And of course, later on into the offseason here, June 29th was a big day for the Penguins, where they made a significant trade with the Coyotes, sending forward Phil Kessel, who's been a very productive player throughout his career during his time with the Penguins, along with Dane Burks, a 2021 fourth-round selection, in exchange for Alex Galchenyuk and prospect defenseman Pierre-Olivier Joseph. Now, obviously, Kessel was rumored to have a lot of things going on off the ice, a little bit of a rift with Mike Sullivan, perhaps. I know that move was made for more than just trying to shake up the team and make them more successful on the ice. There was a lot of stuff going on behind the scenes that may or may not be true. There's been all kinds of rumors and speculation. I don't know exactly 100% what was going on, but clearly it was time for the Penguins and Kessel to no longer work together, I guess is what we could safely say here. But I'm even much as he had to make that trade for other purposes, I'm just not yet convinced that really makes the Penguins better. It's hard to win those type of trades when you're trading a top player of that nature. Teams rarely come ahead, at least in the short term. So as much as it might have felt like it was necessary to do, I think that does, make them take a step back in what they're able to accomplish offensively. I mean, Galchenyuk's a player that the Penguins were eyeing for some time back when he was in Montreal. They appeared to have interest back then, but never pulled the trigger on a deal. And we'll see if he can fit in well, playing maybe in the left wing with either Crosby or Malkin. I mean, I would think probably Malkin's line would be the more likely spot for him. But we'll see. I mean, if he can fulfill his potential, maybe it'll be okay longer term. But obviously, with a guy like Kessel putting up 90-point seasons, that's definitely very difficult to replace. So there's definitely taking a step back in their overall offensive power, in my opinion, even though that trade, like I said, probably felt necessary for other reasons. Now let's take a look at his signing history as well during the last season and during this offseason as well. Now, during the last season, we did see a couple of players receive extensions from Jim Rutherford, including forward Jake Guentzel, who inked a 5-year contract at $6 million per season. Jake Guentzel was having a terrific year last year, really broke out as a regular season contributor, not just a playoff guy. Not that he hasn't had good regular seasons, but his playoff record before last year was certainly much stronger. And I always said if playoff Jake Guentzel could show up during the regular season more frequently, he could be a 40-plus goal scorer, 35-goal scorer, and he proved that last year. And if he can continue to score at a comparable pace during his prime years here, which is going to cover the bulk of that contract, then that's going to be a very valuable contract and could look like a bargain here. I mean, to have a $6 million player scoring at 40 goals with the way things are going today with the current marketplace, that is an excellent deal. So if he can keep it up, that's going to be a great contract for the Penguins. So I do like that signing by Rutherford. He inked backup goaltender Casey DeSmith to a 3-year extension at $1.25. I kind of felt that probably was putting the writing on the wall for Tristan Jarry to not really have much of a future at the NHL level, at least with the Penguins. So would not be surprised to see him moved out. But at the same time, they very well might decide, for cap reasons, more so than anything else, to possibly move DeSmith and bring up Jarry. But of course, there's also question marks around Matt Murray, who's heading into the final year of his contract. We'll see how Rutherford handles that. But when he was asked about it during this offseason, he didn't really have a lot to say. Just kind of kept referring to the fact that Murray's a restricted free agent and he would deal with it later. So I'm not sure that they're completely sold on locking him up longer term. But I'm sure that the contracts that we've seen down in the state of Florida between Vasilevsky and Bobrovsky is certainly concerning to a guy like Rutherford, who has to ink Murray to a new deal if they're going to stick with him longer term, as well as some other GMs around the league as well. Because if you're anywhere as comparable to those guys, then you're going to be eligible for a mega contract, increase in payment, and a lot of these teams just can't afford it right now because of the lack of increase in the salary cap. So we'll see how they handle that moving forward here. Now, of course, Rutherford was still busy inking guys like Chad Ruhwedel to a 2-year extension. It's a $700K. Of course, he was a pending unrestricted free agent, but he was inked to a new deal on May 23rd. They also kept Juuso Riikola around for another year. Of course, he was an RFA, signed a 1-year deal with the Penguins back on May 30th for $850,000. He certainly proved to be a guy that was valuable and worth keeping around for sure. Now, the one move in free agency that certainly garnered a lot of attention by Rutherford and the Penguins was signing forward Brandon Tanev to a 6-year deal at $3.5 million. So he left the Winnipeg Jets to go for this contract for Pittsburgh, and I really don't blame him. The Winnipeg Jets never would have been able to give him this contract. There's no way they would have had the room to do that. And I like Tanev's game, I really do. I'm just not sure about a 6-year term for a bottom 6 forward. That's very unusual, not something you see very often. I mean, obviously, maybe they see more what he can provide than I do. But I mean, really, I see Brandon Tanev at best as being a third-line player, somebody who can really work hard on the forecheck. He can certainly play on the PK. He can be a nice role player for them. He works hard. Can chip in with a little bit of offense. But overall, just a 6-year deal at 3.5 seems a little rich for me. But I guess we'll see how that works out for them. But I do have concerns over the richness of that contract, I guess we'll say. And of course, he also inked guys like Teddy Bluger and Zach Aston Reese to 2-year deals. Of course, they were both RFAs. Bluger getting $750,000 per year, and Aston Reese getting $1 million. Now, of course, both those contracts are fine. I have no concerns with them. Teddy Bluger certainly got called up later last year, fit in quite nicely, and was being productive by the end of the season. So I would not be surprised to see both those guys play more regular roles with the team moving forward. Now let's take a quick look at how they made out with the 2019 NHL Draft. Of course, in recent years, the Penguins haven't had too many high picks. This year, in the first round, they were picking number 21 overall, where they selected forward Samuel Poulin, right winger from Sherbrooke in the QMJHL. Certainly a player who appears to have a lot of potential. His father, Patrick Poulin, played in the NHL for some time. Never really became a big name, but certainly has the hockey pedigree in his system here. So obviously, Poulin looks like he has a pretty solid future. And now in the third round, where they selected again, they took another winger from the Quebec League, right winger Nathan Legare from Baie-Comeau. Then they selected in round number 5, Judd Caulfield, a right winger from the U.S. program. And then they had 2 7th-round picks, where they took a few Europeans in Valtteri Puustinen and Santeri Irola. Now, I guess the one thing we've seen the Penguins do quite a bit in recent years is trade a lot of picks for trade deadline acquisitions and kind of keep going for it year after year. And I do think that for the most part, that's been a good strategy. They've had a lot of success, a lot of great playoff runs. They've got 3 Stanley Cups during Crosby's era with the Penguins here. And really, as long as they've got Sid and Malkin kind of still in their prime years, still being productive, they have the necessary tools to be competitive and have a shot if they have the surrounding pieces to kind of fit in to fill in the holes around them. And really, for the most part, they've been able to do a pretty good job with that. They've been extremely competitive, and even in the years that didn't win cups, they've made the playoffs a lot of times and had some deep runs as well. So the only thing is, though, going forward is they need to start restocking that prospect pool cupboard, because as these guys start to age, and even though their production hasn't really turned down a whole lot as of yet, it's bound to happen at some point here over the next few years. They need the next big stars to start moving in. They get ready to take over this team in a few years' time, and they just don't have that right now. So I guess I would like to see Rutherford not trade away so many picks, and even though they feel like they can go for it, to maybe find other ways to make this team better and hang on to some more of those draft picks so they can stock the cupboards moving forward. But overall with this franchise, I do like a lot of Jim Rutherford's work, but I do have some concerns. Like I said earlier in the video, I certainly have some concerns with the Brandon Tanev signing. I really like the player. I think he will be a good fit, provide something different that they didn't really have much of in their lineup. I just like to think the contract is a little bit rich for my liking, so I'm not real crazy about that. In a sense, some of the trades he's made, as much as they might have seemed necessary, like the Kessel trade, it's just almost impossible to win. And a lot of these other trades were kind of swapping guys for each other, that kind of giving people a fresh start. I'm just not sure that the team really came out being a whole lot better. They didn't have a great playoff this past year, and now I'm not really sure we can say they're any better heading into the new season that they were at the end of last season. So for that reason, I'm giving Rutherford a C+, although I will give him a lot of credit for going for the big trades. He's not afraid to make bold moves, and he definitely had to do that this year. Just he was in a tough predicament trading Kessel. It's just a deal that almost seems impossible to win, at least in the short term. I just can't imagine Alex Galchenyuk coming in and putting up a 90-point season to replace all the offense that they got out of Kessel, even though he might have drove people a little crazy, been hard to work with, or whatever was going on behind the scenes in the dressing room. It's just hard for somebody else to kind of take over and provide the same type of thing without the headaches that you get in that regard. So let me know what you think of Jim Rutherford's work with the Pittsburgh Penguins. Like I said, he's not afraid to make a lot of moves, and I expect more from him throughout this year. We'll see how these moves that he made during this offseason especially pan out for the coming season. If you're new to the channel, consider subscribing and turning on your notifications so you don't miss any future content. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it as well. I'd appreciate it if you did. As always, thank you for watching, and I will catch you next time.